This episode is proudly supported by Montague Plums, handpicked for you.
The things that we're really looking for in plums, first of all, they've got to be sweet. We're really looking for a full flavour explosion in our plums. Red flesh is critically important to us, higher in antioxidants, so all that good stuff. And then we're also looking to add a slightly firmer texture, so there's almost a little crunch. That's the real driver for us.
For more information, go to montague.com.au.
It excites me on a daily basis, John, really. I mean, it's just, it's such a, because every day is different. And I think that whole seasonality that we get through, right, as you move through the year, different fish are being caught.
This is Fishtales, a seafood podcast. I'm John Susman. In today's podcast, we revisit Martin Bosley, famed New Zealand chef turned fishmonger, at his business, Yellow Brick Road. From his base in Wellington, New Zealand, Boz services the who's who of New Zealand restaurants with a range of seafood sourced directly from fishermen throughout New Zealand. Along with working with a broad group of fishers to maximise the quality, his knowledgeable, personalised service is highly regarded by chefs. He is genuinely passionate about the products he sells and is eternally eager to share that knowledge with his customers. We catch up with Boz to hear how the past few years have been in seafood in New Zealand and to seek his thoughts on what's to come in 2023.
So Martin Bosley is my name. Most people call me Boz. And I'm Yellow Brick Road is the seafood company that I own. And we're based in Wellington, Aotearoa, New Zealand. But we supply seafood right around the country from the top of the North Island to the bottom of the South. It's been overall, I have to say it's been really positive, John. Auckland was still locked down in summer just after Christmas last year. So they had a really rough time getting into it. But the rest of the country sort of came out guns blazing really towards the beginning of the year, and it's pretty much continued through. Restaurants have been well supported. They've shifted their thinking and their the way they're approaching what they're doing. So I think they're better for it, and they probably agree with that. So overall, it's been a good year. The weather has played havoc really with us in terms of seafood supply, which has been we've probably had more. Our oyster farmers have had more days closed this year than they've had in history, basically, which is a climate change issue, I think, probably more than anything. But overall, I'd have to say it's been a really positive year for us all around.
New Zealand's relatively small population supports a diverse and progressive food service industry, which, like many places throughout the world, was subject to dynamically changing rules and regulations regarding COVID restrictions.
We were closed for months and months and months. So I said it wasn't as extreme as Victoria got, but what we had, John, was this stop-start thing where we were told you could go. We had this sort of, this green light, red light, orange light system that was brought into place. And then there was restrictions around you could open, but you could only have so many people. And it was very, very confusing. If you're a bar, you could have this. If you had an outside area, you could have that. None of which seemed to make sense. And because, they'd say, right, you can open. And then literally 15 days later at one point, they said, no, you're all closed again. So it was, we're constantly sort of struggling as to do we, don't we, are we, aren't we? It was a real struggle to get any sort of momentum going. 2021 was horrendous for that. So with that came a real caution as to how people reopen. So finally this year when they said, okay, in 2022, we were going to be back, we're going to slowly, reduce the restrictions and ease them off. People are still very nervous about, I won't buy too much in case we get closed down again. And the general public were also like, well, we might not book that just yet because we might get shut down again. We might not be able to have that. So there was a real air of uncertainty around everything, which probably took a good several months, I think, for that to really shake before people started to feel confident again about, okay, I can go out again. I can book that dinner, that wedding, that whatever. But we're still seeing that caution, though, from the restaurants in terms of menu sizes and purchasing habits. That's really changed.
Although isolated from the rest of the world by a significant distance, Kiwis by nature are adventurous travellers, often found in all four corners of the planet. With COVID limitations on travel, they quickly took to exploring their own backyard, proving to be a boon for food service operators around the islands of New Zealand.
Just went gangbusters. The regions here kind of, like the region where I live, Greytown, which is an hour out of Wellington, like in the South Wairarapa, which is wine growing country. The two things that got this region through were tourism and agriculture. And Hawke's Bay was the same. As you just said, you couldn't travel overseas, but you could travel locally. And New Zealand tourism, that money they would normally invest and spend on the offshore market, suddenly had to turn that around and go, right, now we need to spend that locally. And that was interesting because that was something they'd never really had to do before. So they never really focused on what was here at home. And one of the things that came out of that was this sort of sudden realisation that, look at that, there's a food and wine tourism type thing here right on our doorstep. We've been telling people that, but we've never actually really looked at it before. And that's continued on, even though as the borders have opened, people are still out there exploring their own backyard. It's been great for the regions.
New Zealand has a surprisingly diverse range of regional seafoods, with local seafoods only being found in particular areas. With the boom in regional demand and an increased interest in the Eat Local movement, regions began to take advantage of their local seafood.
It's been really interesting because it's one is we were encouraged to spend money locally. It was like spend money where you shop where you live kind of thing. So we rather than they started to focus on what actually does come, what is coming from my region that they never really looked at before, and so it almost became a case of hyper local in some respects, and it was amazing. They didn't know that some of the stuff was actually harvested, landed, fished, or whatever from within their region, and also they expanded their view beyond their region slightly as well. Because we don't while we're a very narrow country, we're a very long country. So you kind of tend not to go broaden your horizon out, but you broaden your horizon breadthways instead. So chefs started to sort of go, actually, I might have a look at that. I might, we will take that. So they also started to look, and because of that, they then started saying, because all the snapper that was coming out of Auckland, for instance, that was going in the South Island, they started to go, actually, well, what is being caught locally for me? And they started looking at those local fish. It was great. Finally.
Wild seafood supply worldwide continues to be under significant pressure. Increased catch restrictions and regulations combined with an increase in demand has had the effect of putting great pressure on supply of seafood in New Zealand, just as it has elsewhere in the world.
We've struggled. There's changes within the fishing industry here itself, cameras on boats, that kind of thing. So a lot of guys are getting out of it. A lot of day boat guys aren't fishing. Diesel costs, lack of crews. So boats are going out to try and fish longer to fill the hold with a bit more fish. So that's been a problem. Also, trying to get crews to man those boats. A run of bad weather has meant we've had days where boats haven't gone out to go fishing at all. And I said, Tomo, one of our oyster farmers, said to me that day, he's been closed 192 days this year, which is 100 days more than he was closed than any other year, down to weather. So, there are guys getting out of the industry, as I say, because of this, the legislation. We've seen massive quota reductions. 50% in Hapuka, for instance, 40% in Tarakihi. Those governmental changes don't help either, because also what that does is drives up the price as well, right? Because the demand is still there, but the supply is being squeezed. It's definitely had its challenges for sure.
Seafood prices have gone up globally throughout and post-COVID, and New Zealand has seen some drastic price increases as supply tightens and demand increases.
Salmon went up for us, went up by 15%, literally next week. It was like, you can't do that. And they're like, well, we have to, And I thought, how do I go to our clients and say, okay, the salmon's just gone up by 15%. Previously, you'd have been lynched. 2% would have caused a ruckus. These guys just seemed to, this time around they went, yeah, okay, because it's not the only thing that's going up, right? You always think that you're the only one putting your price up. Yours is the only product going up, but they're seeing it across the board. Chicken went up, lamb went up, beef went up. So it was just part of a whole thread of things that that the price is increased. I don't know how they're absorbing it, because the cost of main courses doesn't seem to have gone up that much at all. And here we're still because of the staffing crisis we've got within hospitality. You've got restaurants that should seat 70 doing 50. The restaurants that should be doing lunch 5 days a week doing lunch 1 day a week, if at all, and just doing nights, and open for 4 nights rather than 5 or 6 nights. So they've reduced their opening hours down to suit their staffing levels. So their income must have dropped, but their fixed costs are still the same. But the main courses don't seem to have gone up that much either. The corollary is that those restaurants say to me, we've never been more profitable. But they became really careful about the size of the menu. And I say one of the things that we saw immediately was a drop-off in seafood purchases, because I think they felt that, if Auntie Jacinda decided to shut us down again, meat could be frozen, whereas fish had to be given away or cooked or whatever. So, one of the first things that went off a lot of menus was seafood. It was just gone, and people that were, say, getting 10 kgs of fish a day or a week or whatever, they were halving that amount and going, I just want 2 kgs. And if they sold it at lunch or dinner, then they might get another 2 kgs the next day. Their buying habits changed dramatically to reflect the sort of this nervousness that there was there about what might happen. As the year has gone on, that's freed up, and we're back. And we've just, in fact, November was an absolute cracker month for us. It was great, right out of the bag, really. Which is great. But the menus still seem to be small, but changing more frequently.
As supply has tightened, so too have chefs looked to non-traditional species to menu. The need for chefs to become more creative in both dish design and the procurement process has become an imperative that Martin is servicing.
One of the things we've seen this year, which has been really interesting, that I've really struggled to keep up with, has been octopus. A few years ago I was trying to push octopus and say, this is a great product, and it's a great price, and it's a bit of a money maker, and it's got versatility and all these sort of things. And no one was taking me up on it at all. And this year it's been like, Pa's got any octopus? We just want the tentacles, and we want this, that, and the other. I'm like, all of a sudden, did you guys all read the same book or something? That, has Josh Nyland just done a new octopus recipe that you all want to give a go? And they're all out there. So we've seen a shift to, like, I guess, kind of more intriguing, interesting, unusual fish. If octopus can be called an unusual fish, that we wouldn't normally be a staple of our menus in this country, is now becoming increasingly one. We've struggled to get crayfish this year. Real struggle on crayfish for a number of reasons. The Chinese market being primarily one of them. Again, weather, divers, etc. Demand. So we've struggled to get crayfish for the domestic market. So I think that's seen a switch away from, because they can't get it, they go, well, we've got, what else we're going to have instead. So something that we would never have been able to sell here before, weirdly, Queensland spanner crab. Because again, it was imported, it wasn't local, etc., etc. Well, now we're selling truckloads of it.
Several new aquaculture and wild catch fisheries are coming to market in New Zealand, creating some exciting options for fishmongers and chefs.
Well, we've got the guys down in Invercargill who are slowly starting to farm whitebait, commercially. They reckon they'll be up, they're up to sort of 200 or 300 kilos at the moment. They reckon in a year or 2 years there'll be a year-round commercial supply of whitebait, which will be huge for us here, because this year there was no whitebait, basically. Again, climate and other factors, weather. Hardly anybody was going out and fishing for that. So if that can come on stream, that'd be great. There's the NIWA, which is our Atmospheric Water Research Institute. I've been playing around with farming kingfish up at Ruakaka to prove that basically can be done. So they've got a model there that's now that's ready for commercialisation for someone to take on. And the fish is good, they're small fish, small kingfish, but they're tasty. You've got the guys at New Fish, which are a bit of a sort of bioscience research facility in Auckland, and they're working with the chef of Vaughan Mabe out of Amersfield in Queenstown. He's developed a paua saucisson, like a mortadella, with kuraboto pork and paua, or black abalone through it, which is an awesome product. So that's like a long log, like a salami, and sliced. But they're also looking at an algae-based version of the same thing. So there's some really interesting sort of innovative products coming out there that are definitely worth looking at, and that have probably got longevity attached to them as well, rather than just that's a bit of fun.
There's always been a strong shellfish eating culture in New Zealand. However, the popularity of oysters and clams in New Zealand is at an all-time high. This popularity may be being driven by the growing interest in regional food and culinary experiences.
Bringing on new oyster growers, oyster suppliers is always oysters are a real passion of mine. It's always been something that we've been pushing as well, is to put in that whole provenance of an oyster on menus, and so we're getting that engagement now. And interesting, also what's happening is that the clients are understanding that finally as well. That's been really good. That's been another sort of real positive sign. And again, that's something that's probably come out of that regional tourism thing that happened. As a bit of an awareness of that. People who'd never gone to the Bay of Islands before now going there and going, "Did you know they grow oysters up there?" I'm like, "Yep, I did." So they're kind of seeing that now as well. So it's and we've got chefs who before have never really sort of wanted to get out there amongst it, now contacting me and saying, right, I'm taking my crew away, just putting next year's travel plans in place. We want to go and visit the oyster farm. We want to go and see the guys at Cloudy Bay Clams. We want to go, they're wanting to take their teams out to see where the product is coming from and how it gets to them, which again is kind of like a new engagement for us also, where there's that level of excitement from them going, oh, okay. Because I think quite often chefs here have looked overseas and gone, I think I've said to you before, God, if I get asked for razor clams one more time, we just don't have them in this country, but they see, they've read a book from overseas or whatever, and they go, oh, razor clams, I want to do razor clams too. And you go, well, we don't have razor clams, but we've got Cloudy Bay clams, these amazing clams. Oh, but they don't do razor clams. No, they fucking don't do razor clams, But now, that sort of seems to have finally stopped.
Like many in the seafood industry, Boz is seeing a return to simplicity in the preparation, service and enjoyment of seafood.
Oh, for me, it's, I reckon my eating gets simpler and simpler each year, John. The better the seafood, the less I do to it, really. And, in fact, I was saying to some people who are coming for Christmas Eve dinner, I said, like, whatever you want, right? I said, nothing's a problem. I'll cook whatever you want, right? Don't think, that might be too hard. It's not too hard for me at all. You name it, what do you want, right? And what they wanted was just a beautifully cooked piece of fish on asparagus with some potato puree next to it. You can't go wrong, And so even when given the choice of like going, you could have, there's caviar in the fridge if you want caviar. There's crayfish if you want crayfish. There's whatever. No, give me a simple well-cooked piece of fish, some puree potatoes, some buttered asparagus on the side, and that'll be me. And I'll probably start with a dozen or two oysters beforehand, of course, because it would be rude, it would be rude not to. And that'll be me. Maybe got a crayfish over summer at some point. We'll hit the coast and do a bit of diving and see what comes up.
Boz is an eternal seafood optimist. He's keen to see both chefs and consumers to continue to explore the lesser-known species and is looking into 2023 with a focus on encouraging everyone to just simply eat more seafood.
I'm looking forward to things settling down a bit, that we get a bit more stability in the within the industry in terms around catch, that we a bit of the nervousness goes out of it, and a bit more sort of guarantee around that around supply. And I'm looking forward to sort of chefs actually, again, starting to experiment a bit more. Summer's coming, real seafood time of the year for chefs as well, and for us. And for them to sort of start focusing again really on those, as I've said before, like those lesser known species rather than, snapper's now $45 a kilo, right? So, they needed to look at those sort of $20 to $25, $30 kilo fish. Well, that's your mokies and that's the trevallies and that's the monkfishes and again, look, finally flatfish are starting to move. They're finally recognising that, flounder on the bone on a plate is actually a bloody good thing to do. And so, again, after harping on about it for a couple of years, and I'm going, I don't like the bones. Now it's like, what size of the flounder you've got. So that's quite exciting as well, that we're seeing a dynamic shift in their thinking. So, looking forward to being a part of that, and encouraging that way of thinking as well.
This is Fishtales, a seafood podcast. A Deep in the Weeds production. I'm John Susman. Follow us on Instagram at Fishtales Seafood Podcast, or email us at fishtalespodcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay tuned for more tales from beneath the surface of the seafood world every Friday on your podcast app.